my apologies to them. But the others of you will have your work recorded. So at this point, let's turn it over to Rhonda for a little bit of a pause in the poetry and have her discuss a little bit more about Roots for Life.
Yes, again, I'm the executive director for Roots for Life. We are an organization founded in 2017, and we actually work on a lot of the issues that you talked about. We work on, we want to help create change. If you've been to our website, you'll see that it says inspire change, and that's our goal, that we want people to learn about how to cook food and how to grow food. We know if you grow your food, you'll also grow your health. And so one of our signature programs is Crops in the Kitchen. And through that program, we actually work with program participants on how to cook fresh produce that, if you go into a grocery store and you see an eggplant or a spaghetti squash, you may not know how to cook it. So we work with program participants and knowing how to cook food and also the nutritional value of food. We also work with transitional shelters that I spoke about in the beginning. And as they leave transitional shelters and they move into permanent supportive housing, we've been giving out welcome home baskets. So the baskets are set up like in a laundry basket, and it has dishes, dish towels, spices, cookbooks, because we want them to go into their new space to be able to cook and to have nutritious food. We also have our community fridge that we're working on, that we're trying to implement by March, that people will have access to food 24 hours a day. And I know we talked about food waste, so we'll be working with a few food recovery organizations that will be able to put food in these refrigerators and allow people to have food anytime that they get hungry. And so that's one of the things that's very important to us, is that we increase the access to food. We also work on food sustainability. And by that, we're teaching people how to grow in any space that they live in. And so as you continue to go to our website or you sign up for our email, you'll be able to see dates for, some of our workshops that are coming up. We want to teach container garden growing. And then I also have a horticulturist, and she is very familiar with hydroponic gardens that you can grow also in any space, that if you don't have a lot of sunlight, you'll be able to grow in a hydroponic garden. So, sign up for our website and be able to see some of the programs that are upcoming. And then we also have an educational program called Soil to Soul, and we'll be teaching like youth programs and getting them more engaged, that the earlier that you can get someone to make changes, they'll be able to have like lifelong health benefits. So thank you for the poems that you've read. I think it's like a great creative expression of storytelling, that we put stuff on our website and we try to get people to envision hunger, but using art as a way to really like shed light on this issue, that change is made through awareness. And this is one great way to spread the awareness of using spoken word. And we've also had music. So greatly appreciated the way in which you have taken this social issue and made it in a way that people can see it through another lens.
Agreed.
Yeah.
We often talk about the statistics and data and trend lines on hunger. And unfortunately, because of COVID and conflict around the world and increasing levels of poverty, hunger, where we had made some progress worldwide a few years back, it's now again becoming on the rise once again. And as Cliff was saying, it's not just over there. It certainly is over there, but it's also right here, literally on our street corners as we step out of our apartments or homes. So it is all around us. And as Rhonda says, we believe that while all those statistics and data and trend lines are incredibly important in understanding what it is about hunger that makes it such a problem, we believe that the arts, and of course poetry in particular, reaches the heart, perhaps a little bit better than maybe those statistics and trend lines can. So we think there's a role for all of this, and we're trying to bring the arts to bear in this struggle against hunger. So Rhonda, thank you for doing what you're doing. If you wouldn't mind to put the web link to your Roots for Life website in the chat, that would be great. Just so people have it. at the ready. And as she mentioned early on, specifically today, we're raising funds so that Roots for Life will have the wherewithal to purchase a refrigeration system that will help them store and then, of course, distribute food. So real specifically, we're looking to raise enough money for that. Let's pivot back now to some wonderful poems. Our next featured poet is Maritza Rivera, who has been in the Washington, D.C. poetry scene for a long while. She lives currently in Montgomery County, Maryland, and is a Puerto Rican poet and Army veteran who has been writing poetry for over 40 years, 40 years. She's the creator of a whole poetry form called Blackjack Poetry, and she hosts the Mariposa Poetry Retreat. In fact, Maritza, who is also known as Mariposa, is the author of About You, A Mother's War, 21 Blackjack poems, and the Blackjack Poetry Playing Cards stuff. So Maritza, take it away. It's so great to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Hiram. I didn't realize what a tongue twister that was. I have Dale Bread on the Poetry Against Hunger website in English and Spanish, which I intended to read, but I heard I heard a news report on NPR that inspired this other poem. So it's the first time, I'm reading it. It probably still needs some work, but here we go. This is called The Price of Eggs. The price of eggs is soaring, or so the news states, but there is no shortage of eggs like there is in other parts of the world where scarcity is common. So what happens if bread is next? Can we live without ciabatta rolls, baguettes, or Hawaiian bread like they do in so many other countries where they wonder why there is none? They haven't heard of bagels, banana bread, breadsticks, ball, brioche, challah, cornbread, focaccia, naan, pita, pumpernickel, rye, soda bread, sourdough, or whole wheat. Who knew there were 69 different kinds of bread that so many people have no access to? We have eggs, we have bread. Why doesn't everyone?
Mm-hmm.
And about that poem, it just hit me that, they're reporting the price of eggs on the news, but they're not reporting the shortage or the food deserts or people's lack of access. And what Cliff said about his poem and New Orleans, I still have a very vivid picture of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, and being there with my mom, trying to help her out and having to keep going back and back to the grocery store or Walmart to get whatever they had that day.
Yeah.
And so it really affects all of us. And so thank you for having me share my work.
Well, thank you, Maritza, for being here. And Maritza mentioned before she read her poem that she has yet another wonderful poem on the Poetry X Hunger website, which you might want to check out because it's both in Spanish and in English. And, I think powerfully presented in both languages, and was one of the trailblazers on the site presenting things bilingually for us. So that was wonderful. Thank you for reading that very fresh and very poignant poem today, Maritza. Really appreciate it. Appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, always.
Great. It's now my real pleasure to introduce somebody who I've just gotten to know simply because of the wonderful poems that she has offered Poetry X Hunger, but I've never had a chance to meet her in person. Chris Biles has joined us, and Chris, currently lives and works in Washington, D.C. Her day-to-day work involves the management of agricultural capacity strengthening programs internationally. So Mike, you might want to tune in. This is something that Mike McGurr knows quite a bit about. And she previously worked for various conservation and environmental education organizations in California and Alaska, and for the US Peace Corps in Tanzania from 2015 to 18, where she focused on sustainable agriculture and water management. So she comes to this topic fully and completely honestly. Chris enjoys playing with the light and the dark and losing herself in music, anything outside, and of course, some words here and there. She's been published widely, and we're now going to have the pleasure of hearing Chris Biles.
Thank you so much. Very glad to be here supporting this fundraising event. And yes, I work for the USDA, Mike. So I know you used to work for them. At least that was mentioned earlier. I'm with the Foreign Agricultural Service, so we can chat later. But I wrote the poem that I'll share with you all today in the summer of 2020. And it's called The Full Fridge Privilege. I saw a video a few months back showing people around the world in solitude, in quarantine. A ballerina twirled fast and strong on carpet. A guitarist gave a concert to his devoted tabby cat. A painter threw blue at the canvas stretched across his wall, each alone, each living their own struggle, but each unified in their lonely humanity. What a tearjerker. Yes, yes, that's right. We can all make it through, apart, yet still together. But each with a fridge, each with a full fridge. So much more to the story. Bones and skin and bones, a chasm between living and living hungry. Puzzled in the attempt to quantify the boundless emptiness that fills a stomach, pressing concave toward the spine, the contradiction crowds out any concern for unity. Seeing the beauty in a unified humanity, that's a full fridge, full belly privilege. For this vast world to be one, both pandemics must be undone.
Mm-hmm.
And now maybe a little bit about the
yes,
poem.
Please, Chris.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful piece.
Thank you. So yeah, as mentioned, I wrote this in late summer of 2020, as we were still, of course, in the thick of the COVID-19 pandemic, all feeling lonely and trying to find our purpose in isolation, seeking sort of a sense of community and unity in the midst of quarantine. And what inspired this poem was seeing a video, kind of as described, of a bunch of different people in cities all over the world just doing their thing in their own houses or apartments. And the point was made that we were all struggling in isolation, but there was also so much to unite us, so much passion and life, humanity. So we were unified in that struggle to find purpose and hope. And yet in the video, with all the people in their own housing, with their own kitchens, with their own refrigerators, most likely well stocked, especially with grocery delivery. I, of course, thought about all the people who don't have those luxuries. We were in the thick of the COVID pandemic, but the hunger pandemic was also ongoing. And then that thought eventually led me to the conclusion that being moved by that video, by seeing a unified humanity, even in the midst of isolation, might be a luxury and a privilege. If you're experiencing hunger on a daily basis, do you have any real concern for a unified humanity in the face of COVID? Do you feel hope, or is that a full fridge, full belly privilege? And my conclusion in the poem was that, of course, for this vast world to be one, as was depicted in the video, both pandemics must be undone.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, Chris, you've put your finger on, through that poem, such an important concern, and that is over privilege and the fact that many of us who are don't even realize that we are. And so you've helped us identify the fact that indeed we do have privileges that are assumed, ingrained and probably not recognized. And until we do come honest with the fact that we are privileged and others aren't, and try to rectify that situation, we're probably always going to be facing some of these incredibly difficult challenges, including hunger. So really appreciate you being here and raising that key point. And yes, I would encourage you to touch base with Michael McGurr. He worked in the same group that I did in what's called NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture at USDA, and we work pretty closely with colleagues there at FAS. So very
Excellent.
cool. So
Thank you.
thank you. Let's move now to Across the Seas again. I'm hoping this playback will work. There's a young poet again in Zimbabwe named Brian Manyati, who has written a poem titled "I'ma Be Cool Crooning Always." And I'm going to try to play it back here as he presents it. So give me just a second to cue it up here for us. Let's see. How can I enlarge it? Oh, here we go.
Hello, everyone.
You may need to.
My name is Brian Manyati, aka Towanda Ryan. I'm from Zimbabwe. Today I'm presenting to you my poem entitled I'ma Be Cool, Crooning Away. It is inspired by the late Hugh Masekela. May his soul rest in peace. Here it goes. I wanna be there, parachuted like a hovering drone, towering as a dish seated on space or orbit. I wanna lend a hand with terapixel lenses, my bird's eye viewing, all silos spread about as precisely as Governor Joseph sent me. From stratosphere, I want to tiptoe. Hunger won't just find out of my stealth arrival. This chronic poverty is a cruel kind of hell. Our world is choking on a tight, stingy grip that won't let go. We are badly in need of refueling our dietary tanks. Frail and skinny we have become, thin as needles in haystacks, under a severe shock of undernourishment. Send me, so I will help alleviate our children's hunger pains. Why, when we are with arable plains, grasslands, we have turned into badlands of hunger-filled baronages, of speculative titlehold. I wanna be there when we close this vast gulf, a yawning gap in our functionings. Want to let my people win against this voidable disease. I wanna lend a hand. Send me. That's my poem that I wrote.
So that was Brian Manyati, M-A-N-Y-A-T-I, and you can see that poem in text form on the Poetry X Hunger website, and the recording of Brian reading that poem, the one you've just seen, is also there on the website. He really wanted to be with us today, but he did write and say, you know, sometimes internet connectivity is a little bit of an issue. Reliability of that connection is a little bit of an issue. So he sent his best wishes, and we were so pleased that we were at least able to have him here on video. At this point, I think we'll turn it back over to Rhonda to introduce our next showcase leader.
Yes, and I just want to thank all the poets that, you know, shedding light on this issue that, as we can see, is local and it's global. And it's just affecting so many people that there are 41 million people across the United States that are hungry. And in DC, it's 1 in 3. And like you talked about, that the pandemic helped to increase that number. Also, everybody is affected by the cost of rising food. And so even if you are working, it doesn't mean that you don't struggle to put food on the table. And with that, we have to make different choices about what we eat and how it affects our health. And so Kelly Morgan is like a health expert. She's a health coach, and she is the vice president for Roots for Life. And she is going to shed a little light on that area. Kelly?
Hey, everybody. Hiram, may I share my screen?
Oh, sure.
I am a heavy PowerPoint user.
Sure. You should be able to now, Kelly.
Thank you. Nerd alert. Okay. So let's start. Okay. Can everybody see my screen
Yes.
slides? Okay, great. So I wanted to highlight a couple of details about food deserts and food insecurity. And boy, have these poems been just the perfect illustration for what I had prepared. And just each poem really, it brings to life and humanizes a problem that truly is a pandemic that we just, for some reason, have decided as a civilization we're going to live with. And we at Roots for Life find that completely unacceptable. So I started out by thinking, well, I know I don't live in a food desert. I'm in Fairfax, Virginia, a suburb of Washington, D.C. And I did a quick Google Maps search of a 5-mile radius of my home here. There are at least 12 grocery stores. I stopped counting. There were more than that, but I got bored. So amongst those are your commonly known stores, your Safeways, your Wegmans, your Whole Foods, all that stuff. 2 of those are in walking distance for me, an easy walk. We also have just an incredible blessing in our area of tons of full service, full sized ethnic markets. So we have an H Mart, a Great Wall, a beautiful Indian market, a Latin market. My area is the opposite of food insecure. And that poem about privilege of a full refrigerator really, it hit home, because I sit here with so much privilege and don't even notice the absolutely absurd number of options I have for fresh, healthy food all around me. So that's I am the opposite of food insecurity. And to just clarify what food insecurity is, Feeding America defines it as a lack of access at times to enough food for an active, healthy life for all household members. And I find that that definition doesn't quite get at the seriousness of the problem. That at times kind of bothers me, because a lot of people in our country, in our world, and even in our area, with all this money and all this power in our area, people are food insecure, and many of them are malnourished because of it. And food insecurity is everywhere. This is not an inner city problem. This is not a poor people problem. This is an everybody problem. There are food deserts all over the place. Loudoun County, Virginia, when it was being built up, my cousin lives in Brambleton, and he lived in a technical food desert despite a $1 million home. So this is something that can affect all of us, but it disproportionately affects people who are poor and vulnerable. And it's a significant health issue. This is a public health crisis that we're just, it feels like a lot of the world has given up on. And that's the frustration that drives Roots for Life, that we are not giving up on our people and their needs for nutrition. So it's also a human rights issue. Food is a human right. It is one of our basic needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food is right there. We can't live without it. And a lack of healthy, nutritious food is not just linked to, not feeling great, not having energy. There are health problems that come from it, many that lead to a higher incidence of an early death. early death being way before your time, under 50. It also leads to poor educational outcomes because if you're hungry, you can't concentrate and your brain's not getting the nutrition that you need to be able to concentrate. It also, because of those education issues, because of the poor decision making that happens when you're hungry and your body is deprived, leads to a much higher likelihood of future incarceration. And frankly, once you hit that incarceration point, really, it's hard to turn anything around. So the size of the problem in DC is absurd for the amount of money we have in this area. 1 in 7 households are struggling against hunger. That might not sound like a lot, but then think about 14.5% of residents in the area are food insecure. And that means that they don't have access to, the vitamins and minerals and all those macronutrients that we need to survive, and not just survive, but thrive. There are over 49, the count was from a couple years ago. So now there's definitely more than 49 full service grocery stores in DC, but only 3 are located in some of the poor and really primarily Black. This is a racial problem that we won't get into today, but we're hurting people who are at a disadvantage already in wards 7 and 8. As a contrast, those 3 stores that are in wards 7 and 8, a wealthier ward 6 has more than 10 full service grocery stores. And the majority of our food deserts are located in, surprise, surprise, the poorer areas. So we have 2 vulnerable populations. I don't want to minimize the impact of food insecurity on adults who are not at risk, in at-risk age groups, but I want to highlight children and seniors. Over 31,000 children in the district don't know how they're going to get their next meal. And the horror of that, of these little children whose job at that age is just to learn and grow, they don't have the nutrition they need to be able to do what their job is. So we also have this issue that was very much exacerbated during the pandemic when schools were closed, that low income and poor DC students often have little to nothing to eat over the weekends. They rely on the breakfasts and lunches that are provided by the schools through those programs where it's either free or low cost lunches and breakfasts. So this became an even bigger issue when they were unable to go to school and get at least 2 meals a day, 5 days a week. So these effects on children start in pregnancy with their mother. Children who are malnourished in those early development years, 0 to 2, they end up having lower IQ scores compared to those who are not malnourished in those age groups. So they're already starting off, many steps behind the others. Hungry children can't engage in daily activities at school when they do their work, social interaction, play. Again, the things that are a child's job at that point. They are twice as likely to be placed in special education and also twice as likely to be kept back a year in school. So every child who is malnourished, you can see that they're taking step after step after step back from the starting line, from where their peers get to start. Senior citizens also are a very vulnerable population in our city, and the effect of malnutrition on them, which is already a concern in food secure seniors. We already have nutrition issues in those who are not at risk like this. Those who are at risk in these food deserts are 60% more likely to experience depression. They are more than half as likely to report a heart attack and to develop asthma. And 40% are more likely to have congestive heart failure. These are all things that should not be happening to a senior. So Roots for Life is all about making this stop. This is just, it's something that literally keeps us up at night. This is why we do our work. So we're working in the poorest and most food insecure wards of 4, 5, 7, and 8. And if you'll remember from a moment ago, 7 and 8 only have 3 grocery stores combined. Rhonda told you about our current programs, but just to refresh your memory, we have Crops in the Kitchen, which is cooking classes, Countertop Crops, which is container gardening, Soil to Soul, one of our newer programs, is a youth program. And one of our biggest projects that took off during the pandemic when we couldn't be out there in the community was housewarming baskets. And these are kitchen essentials. So a cookbook, utensils for cooking food, dish towels, that kind of thing that when you move into a new place and you start from zero, you need to at least have those to get started. So those are for transitional shelter people who are graduates who are moving on to permanent housing. And Rhonda also mentioned that we are working on a community fridge that hopefully, depending on how things go today, we can have operational by March of this year. So to close up, here's how you can help. First of all, donate. Not to be crass, but the best way to help any organization is with money because it can go directly to the community. We also have, for those housewarming baskets, an Amazon wish list where you can select some of the items that we need and they are sent right to us to start putting in baskets. We also love volunteers, and we need volunteers for our in-person events for Crops in the Kitchen and container gardening classes. We need groups to make housewarming baskets. If you and some buddies want to get together and make a couple baskets, you'd have a huge impact on our community. And finally, for those who are homebodies, we also are always looking for people to help us out with creating social media posts and doing blog post writing. And you'd work directly with me and we'd have a great time.
Wonderful.
So that is just a word from me. And
Thank you.
I thank you all so much for having us.
Thank you, Kelly. You gave us the all too daunting, stark picture locally, what we're dealing with here, and brought all of that home all too forcefully to us, and really appreciate that background. I'm also wondering if one of the things that this group of poets might be able to contribute would be some of its lines, excerpts from some of its poems, or all of the poems in totality on your website. So we can maybe think about that and talk about that later on. So
Heck, yes, Hiram.
really
Yes.
Yeah, I really appreciate that backdrop. So let's begin the wind down here with two wonderful poets who will help end up our session together. The first poet is Patricia Gray. Patricia, or I call her Pat, received an Artist Fellowship in Poetry in 2023, so this year, from the Washington, D.C. Commission on the Arts and Humanities. She plans to take full advantage of the additional time to write that the following fellowship provides, and has decided to teach only one workshop this year, the one that is coming up in 3 weeks, February 4 through, starting, I guess, on February 4, on how to write a poem. It will be live online from the Writers Center, a wonderful facility we have here in the area in Bethesda, and will include a prompt for how to write love poems for Valentine's Day. She lives on Capitol Hill and tries to avoid politics and politicians. So Patricia, take it away. Thanks.
Thank you, Hiram. It's wonderful to be here and to hear other poems. And I feel like I'm at home. I'm going to read a poem called Then and Now, and it mentions two other poets. The first one is in the epigraph, and that's Aaron R., and he's in a part of Poetry X Summer.
Yes.
And the other one is Ross Gay, who's a wonderful poet, and you'll hear why I'm mentioning him in the poem. So here we go, Then and Now. We're beginning, each one beginning, and that's Aaron R. In the Eden of imagination, it is early evening. Insects wheeze and buzz, glad for the cool. And a barefoot woman in a soft cotton dress walks lightly on damp grass. She is in an orchard, and her hand reaches for the reddest apple. Its sweet juice and crunch explode joy in her mouth. There is no taste like this, and no punishment, for it is all happening now. And the orchard is real, planted on a vacant city lot in the middle of our country by a woman named Countryman. It is a kind of Eden where anyone can walk, pick pears, figs, apples, peaches, and berries too in their season, all free. And why not? Asked poet Ross Gay, who joined this good work. While in other cities, communities are finding abandoned parks, forgotten schoolyards, and yes, they are planting orchards with the knowledge we were born to, knowledge we can eat.
Thank you, Pat, for the hope in that poem. I love it. And I can't wait to tell Aaron R. that he's been quoted in Epitaph. I think he'll be very excited. He is in Arlington, Virginia. Pat, would you like to say anything more kind of briefly about the poem?
Well, I had happened to read about Ross Gay, whose poems I liked anyway, and found out that he was doing this. And I just thought, why can't we do that? I mean, we could grow food in all kinds of places and just let it be free, you know. And the people in the community who have a green thumb, you know, would love to do things like that.
Yes. Well, wonderful to have you and Mr. Gay and Aaron R. here with us in your poem today. Really appreciate that. It struck me as both a lush poem, but also a challenging poem in terms of challenging us to think about why can't we do that? Our last showcase poet is Zaina Azam from Alexandria, Virginia. Yes, she is a Palestinian American poet, writer, and editor, and community activist. And get this, she's the poet laureate of Alexandria, Virginia. Congratulations for 2022 through 2025. Her poems have been published in a number of literary journals, an anthology, including, and she's got a long list here, including Pleiades and Cordite Poetry Review. She serves on the board of Growing Palestine, an organization that supports farmers on the West Bank and in Gaza. Zaina holds an MA in Arabic literature from Georgetown University. So we are so pleased to have the poet laureate of Alexandria, Virginia here with us today. Zaina, would you like to share your poem?
Yes, thank you so much, Hiram. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Poetry Ex Hunger and Roots for Life for hosting us today and doing the wonderful work in our communities to alleviate and end hunger. I'm really so honored to participate in this reading and help to uplift the role of poetry and the arts in raising awareness of social issues in our society. I think I'll talk about the poem before I read it. So I'll go the other way. So I chose to focus my poem on agriculture. We know that so many countries rely on planting and farming to feed their people. So, of course, the effects of conflict and drought and extreme weather hits them very hard. So on the local level, it's important to help family farmers to stay on their land and also to put farmers in control of their seeds and their water sources. Farmers play a crucial role in feeding their communities and, in staving off food insecurity. And so now I want to get into a really micro space here. So one of the miracles of planting and farming is the tiny seed that we place in the earth. What an amazing and wondrous piece of life a seed is. A seed holds so much potential, and multiple seeds, many seeds feed communities, and they feed entire countries. Seeds are also part of our heritage and our culture, and they also connect us so profoundly to the land. So here's my poem. It's titled Seed. Seed, so tightly wound, a tiny world waiting for rain, rays, and welcoming ground. To uncage your dream, unfurl your flag, create this intention of brown and bright green. Stem and leaves growing as you open to the earth. Your small hands reach out like rivulets, upward, flowing toward the nurturing sun. Seed, this is the hope you hold, our heritage wrapped up in just one small ovule, bud, grain, to place in our pockets, save for our children who, like us, will pray for rain, for many good seeds that send green hands up through generous soil to proliferate, proffer, feed the world. We plant and plow for those in the womb and onward to the white-haired among us, believing now is the time to end hunger. Seed, your dream is our harvest. Together we nourish, embody your wonder.
Mm, mm.
Thank you.
Zaina, wow.
Mm.
The wonder, the dream embodied in a seed, and the importance of that. You've just done a terrific job of capturing at least my ears, my attention with that poem, and what a wonderful one to begin to bring today's session to a close. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
being with us, Zaina. Really appreciate that. We want to just spend maybe a couple of minutes if anyone would like to unmic, ask a question, or provide an ooh-ah in addition to what's been said in the chat, or any other thoughts, reflections before we turn it over to Rhonda to give us a kind of a goodbye, and then I have one final poem to share to definitely end the session today. But does anyone have any thoughts, reactions, questions that they'd like to share?
Well, Hiram, I wanted to thank you and Roots for Life for putting this together. It wasn't just a participation, but also learning about the organization. That was very, very touching, and hearing all of the different voices. So thank you, Hiram, for all you do to foster
Well,
this
Marissa,
program
thank
and
you.
partner with others.
Thank you for being here and for lending your amazing voice to the cause as well. Any other thoughts? There are a number of links and a number of kind of informational links in the chat. So if you're interested, you can save the chat. I think everyone now knows how to do that since we've all been operating in the Zoomosphere for a long time. And feel free we encourage donations. We understand if folks aren't in a position to make donations, but you're certainly more than invited to make a donation, and let your pets, your uncle, your nurse, your grocery store clerk, everyone know that they can also make a donation to Roots for Life. And the link is in the chat. So seeing no raised hands, or Mike, you're unmuted, so please go ahead. Mike,
yeah, no, I just, as one of the few non-poets here, I just want to thank everybody for all the poems. I was struck at how the breadth of the poems really covered so many of the issues that underlie food insecurity and hunger, whether it's, food waste or access to food and so on. While I was waiting for the Zoom, I not even thinking about it, I was writing a grocery list. Strangely enough, on a notepad from Feeding America. But it struck me what a privilege that is, just to be able to write down a list of everything I want, go to a local grocery store, and without even thinking about it, buy anything basically I want from the store. And this is a good reminder of people in this area that can't do that, and a need for all of us to redouble our efforts. So thanks to everybody who's involved in this, and it's been a good.
So Mike, we're going to now expect to see a poem from you about writing a grocery list. Truly, it's a wonderful way to start a poem. I don't think there's one about a grocery list on the Poetry X Hunger website, so please.
Maybe I could just turn in my list as a
There
poem.
you go. There you go. Well, thanks for being here, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Michael has a long and distinguished career at USDA, where he was working on food insecurity around the world and in the United States as well. Anyone should feel free, as Cliff has just done, to put your contact information or your website in the chat. But let's turn it over to Rhonda. Maybe she can give us a kind of closing remarks, thoughts, and maybe even a running tally of how much has been raised.
I can do all of that. I would like to thank everybody for being here today with us, especially on a Saturday. Thank you for giving us your time. And all the poems have been fabulous and just shedding a light and showing us hunger through and poverty through a different lens. And that's one of the great things about art, because it touches us all in different ways. And again, like with the music also included, that really just really taps into making us think differently. And all of your creativity has been fabulous. So thank you again for your time. And again, this is a fundraiser for Roots for Life. And I just wanted to give the total that we have so far, that it is $680 that we've been able to raise so far. So actually, it is probably one of our most successful fundraisers, and it's virtual. And so we really do appreciate the efforts. One of the things that we said we were going to do with the funds raised today is to put a community fridge in Ward 7 or 8. And we're actively working on partnerships right now to make that happen. And then we talked about food waste. That would be one of our ways in which we're going to do that, and making sure that people don't have problems with getting food. And I know, Mike, you're making a grocery list, and someone could go shopping in a community fridge, that if they're not able to have a grocery list, they could still have nutritious food and access to it 24 hours a day. So just want to thank everybody again, and we greatly appreciate your efforts. If you're interested in working with Roots for Life or volunteering, two of my best volunteers are on the call today, Kelly Morgan and Nyla Dixon. So thank you for being here. And you can always sign up for newsletters to get additional information from us.
Wonderful. And I want to also call out and thank Janique for being here. She is affiliated with an organization about poetry that's used to help in the healing process, titled The Inkwell. And it's so wonderful to have her here with us today too. So it sounds like we're well on our way to buying that fridge, community fridge. So help us get over the top, if you will. Let your friends, and as I say, any and all critters know about this, and encourage them as they can to donate whatever they can. That would just be wonderful. So as we close out today, kind of, yeah, Pat, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just thought of mentioning this. It's a little aside, but I live on Capitol Hill, and where there are lots of little libraries where people trade books, put books in, take books out. And there's also a little food bank.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can put non-spoilable food in the food bank, and it's taken away. I mean, people are using it.
Yes, those food cabinets outside that are made available to any and all to use the food in it are becoming, unfortunately in one way and fortunately in another, very popular and very actively used by communities. So yeah, thanks, Pat, for pointing that out. I'd kind of like to close almost in a kind of what I call a benedictional sort of way So just again, in appreciation for all that you folks are doing, using a poem that I think is just incredibly personal, and as a result of that, universal. It's a poem that won the World Food Day Poetry Competition a few years back, written by Brian Donnell James, who lives in Reston, Virginia. And let me forewarn you, you will probably need to turn your volume up because the recording, he recorded this outdoors. And so it's a little bit, he's a kind of a soft-spoken kind of guy too. So you may need to amplify it just a little bit. Give me 1 second here as I bring it up. This is Brian Donnell James reading his poem titled Testimony. Let's see if I can enlarge it. There we go. To close us out today, Brian Donnell James, poem called Testimony.
Good evening. My name is Brian Donald James, and I'm the 2020 winner of the World Food Day Poetry Competition. I would like to share my poem Testimony with you. Testimony. I was a teenage father then, with little money. My wife and I had saved our lunch so that our son could eat. And we went without a meal that day. As night approached, we had hoped that he would sleep until morning. And with every twist and turn he made, my anxiety rose and fell. But as toddlers do, he rose hungry, rubbing circles on his belly. He was trying to be a big boy, trying to control the desperation I saw in his eyes. I nodded to my wife, and we gathered change from everywhere, anywhere, between cushions and under couches, closets, desk, and cabinet drawers. And I was off to shop with newly found pocket change. Enough for some instant noodles, Kool-Aid, bread, and peanut butter. Even as I counted out the change and people in line smirked and commented, the cashier and I knew I didn't have enough. My eyes swelled, and I tried to control my desperation. She smiled and said, "Well, that's just enough." I bagged my food and I left. Walking back to our little apartment, I will never forget that feeling. Emotion overcame me. Not embarrassment or shame, just thankfulness, just love. I'll do anything for my boy. Thank you. I would like to thank the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, as well as the Capital Area Food Bank and the Poetry X Hunger group. Thank you.
That was Brian Donald James reading his poem to close us out today, titled Testimony. So again, I want to thank everyone who's participated, including my sister from California, Liz. Thank you, Liz, for being here. And wishing everyone a good weekend. And I promise and threaten, I'll be in touch with all of the poets. But Rhonda, maybe you and I could stay on for just a minute to kind of debrief. But really, thank everyone. Hope you have a good weekend. And hey, here's to poetry.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fabulous, powerful.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great
You're
job,
welcome.
poets.
Thank
Thank you.
Great to see everybody. Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye.
I'm going to try to save the chat here. Let's see. So Rhonda, I won't belabor this, but I just want to thank you.
And you're still
again.
on record also.
Oh yeah, let me do it now. Thank you.